Welcome to Module 3 of our Research Methodology course. This module talks about how to write your literature review. In literature review, as we talked about it earlier, it has key components such as the conceptual framework, theoretical framework, the gaps in the literature, and empirical review. The conceptual framework has to do with the key concepts and variables and constructs of your research study. What are the key concepts? Key concepts are the terms and ideas that are surrounding your research topic or area of research. And then the variables are the characteristics or components being measured by your research study. And variables can be dependent variable or independent variable. Next, we are going to talk on the key components of conceptual framework. Now, conceptual framework has the key concepts. The key concepts has to do with the key ideas or terms that surround your research topic or your subject of research study. Then it also has to do with the relationship between the key concepts. What are the relationship linking or connecting the key concepts? What and what is connecting the key concept? And then relevance, the relevance of this key concept to your research. And the next is the visual representation. You represent the concept visually through image, like sketch, graphical sketch or representation. Next, we are going to look into writing your theoretical framework. Theoretical framework has to do with looking into various theories that underpin your research. These are established theories that set foundation for your research. Your research will have to revolve around them, like it has to revolve around the philosophy of those research. Every research has to revolve around a philosophy or school of thought. So theoretical framework is an aspect of research that makes your research to revolve around a school of thought or philosophy. Next, we are going to look into the key components of theoretical framework. A theoretical framework has to do with relevant theories. You look into relevant theories, you have to search different literatures, different past research projects relating to your own topic. And then you look at the topics in which you want to use for your own study. Look at the one that is most relevant to your study so that you will use. You can use more than one theory, either 1, 2, or 3 theories. After that, you have to look at the application of these selected theories to your own present study. How is it applicable to your studies? And then, how is it relevant to your present study? You have to look into it and talk about it in your theoretical framework. And then lastly, you have to look at the relationship of this theory with your conceptual framework. We are going to look into empirical review, how to write your empirical review. We talked about it earlier in the previous module. Now, empirical review is the summaries of past research studies relevant to your present study. It has the following key component. It covers the summary of previous research findings, and it is methodological. It follows the methods used in previous research studies. It also seeks the key findings, in past research studies. You look into the key findings of past research studies that are relevant to the present research study you are carrying out. And then you look at the gaps in literature. What gap exists? What is the knowledge gap? What was covered in the previous research, studies? And what were not covered? Now, if you discover those gaps, you can focus your study on areas that will tackle some of those gaps which you have identified. This brings us to the end of empirical review writing. We are going to look at some tips for writing your literature review. In writing your literature review, you have to be critical. You don't just summarize findings. You have to look in depth into past research studies and then discover gaps, discover relevant information for your own literature review and areas in which you will focus on. You have to be organized also. As you write your literature review, you have to include headings and subheadings. You have to itemize. If you are writing like 2, maybe we know literature review is chapter 2. So your first section will be 2.1. Your second section will be 2.2. Your third section will be 2.3. So as you are writing, maybe under your section 2.2, there are subheadings. You have to itemize those subheadings. For example, under 2.2, other subheadings that follow, you can write 2.2.1, 2.2.2, 2.2.3, and that's how it goes. And then you have to synthesize information. Make sure you derive information, from previous studies and get rich information so that you include them in your own literature. Next, we are going to look at some common mistakes in writing your literature review. Now, one of these aspects is lack of structure. Lack of structure is one aspect that makes your literature review unorganized. So, your literature review is supposed to be well organized, structural. It has to follow a definite structure. As I was mentioning earlier, I said chapter 2 starts with 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4. So it has to be structural. Follow that pattern and use itemized headings and itemized subheadings. And then another mistake is over-relying on secondary information. You don't have to rely overly on secondary information. You have to look into primary information. What are secondary information? Secondary information are result of past research findings. Now, you don't need to rely more on secondary findings. You have to look into primary findings. Now, primary findings has to do with what you have discovered by yourself in the course of your going through previous literature. What have you been able to discover? What are the new informations that you discover as you go through the previous literature? What are the new ideas that have popped up into your mind? Those are primary information or data in which you can include in your literature review. You don't have to ignore gaps. Don't ignore gaps in literature. Once you discover gap, you have to take note of those gaps and then make sure you focus your research on that area. Lastly, we look at the final thoughts. We have to know that a well-structured literature review is very essential.
How successful a project would be can be set in motion by a well-structured literature review. This is essential and is non-negotiable if you want to achieve a successful project. Literature review is sine qua non in every research work that must be embarked on, because this is where your full understanding of the research is demonstrated, because it lays the basic foundation of your studies, so that anyone who sees your work can see the credibility of the literature you've reviewed in your research.